Oi, oi! Welcome to Monday night in wherever the fuck we are. I know where we are, but I'm keeping it a secret from everyone. Tonight's episode is medicine. It's brought to you by Sertraline. Been keeping me out of jail since 2005. It's not. I'm not fucking sponsored by no one. I don't intend to get sponsored by no one neither. Medicine. Mate of mine gave us some really good feedback the other day on last week's one, which I think was a bit fucking flat. I don't know, maybe I wasn't medicated well enough that week. It was a bit flat. So he gave us a bit of feedback. Jake, thank you very much. To do medicine this week, medicine and alternative therapies was kind of what he posited to me, which was lovely. I take a suggestion. Very rarely say no to anything, which hasn't always worked out well, I'll be honest. So yeah, medicine. I've either been shit-faced or medicated for well over my entire life. So I don't know if that qualifies me to talk about it, but I'm certainly going to fucking talk about it. That's just the way it is. So we are at a weird turning point with our trust of science, aren't we? I think going back to pre-industrial times, we all had sort of old wives' tales, and we'd live with families that would share tips and tricks and techniques, and we'd have something which was a much more sort of homegrown version of medicine, of treating one another when we had an illness or a dis-ease, down to like mental things. Like I remember, it's not in my lifetime, but I remember people talking about their grandmothers and giving a little drop of arsenic, things like that, fucking heavy duty poison just to clear the mind, which is nuts. I think aspirin, I believe aspirin came from willow bark, so I think that was something that we would have fucking chewed to get that sort of get that result, so there, that history in these sort of alternative remedies. They weren't alternative back then, they were remedies. Do you know what I mean? They were what people used. They was tried and tested and they worked. And then we come to a point where we turn everything into a fucking commodity, don't we? So we've got Big Pharma have taken all these natural elements, put them through rigorous tests, so we're told, and then made them into a synthetic version of the same thing that we can commodify and fucking sell to everybody, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking that. Let's say I've either been shit-faced or medicated for my entire life, or most of my life. So I'm not knocking medication. My bipolar kind of means that I have to take some sort of medication. Otherwise, I would be a danger to myself and others. And that, that's a real trial and error, which is interesting because you'd think it was science. We're told that science is very black and white, cut and dry. You know what I mean? Straight down the line, we've got evidence that says it does this, and it's not actually. A lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is stick the shit in him and work out what happens from there. Like, best drugs advice I always give to anybody is take half, see how you feel. That's how people know that's not going to work at all. No, you usually might want to drop 4. I think that's just a human condition. But anyhow, we're not talking about drugs, we're talking about medicine. I think the drugs thing comes in when we self-medicate. I think it's certainly a lot of people that I see with mental health problems use alcohol and drugs to self-medicate, to numb the pain, to take the edge off their anxiety, so they're more confident in things. I don't think that's it's not an unusual thing. A lot of people do that, and I think that's acceptable to some degree as well. Not for me. Brings me out in handcuffs. I can't do that shit anymore. But medicine, so we don't, medicating ourselves is one thing, and actually, we've given away all our trust to professionals, haven't we? So we look down on people that are medicating themselves. We look down on people that are working their own ways out of their dis-ease or their discomfort or their maladies or their malfunctions. We look down on those people because they should be seeking medical attention from a professional. Whereas in days gone past, we wouldn't necessarily have that. And I think, with other cultures, perhaps you're not seeing that necessarily. We both primitivize and romanticize tribes in the rainforest. Like they've got the answer to every fucking thing. because they don't watch TV. And there's a degree of that which I'm sure is it. You know, one of the reasons I don't watch TV myself is because of how ill it can make me. But I think also we need to be careful not to romanticize that they've got all the fucking answers to everything, because they still eat and sleep and shit and die like we do, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure that there is like a magic potion out there to solve everything, that elixir. And that's quite interesting. Is that alchemy is quite interesting, isn't it? You know, the idea that you can turn something into, turn shit into gold, essentially, and that becomes this weird sort of mystical quest that people went on with alchemy. And of course, it gave birth to modern chemistry. People knowing what it's like to put two fucking things together and it causes a reaction. So yeah, that's a little aside, and maybe that's something we'll come back to at some point. The alchemy is really fucking fascinating. It's just the idea of magic being part of it, like, you know. I suppose what interested me in using medicine to maintain a level of not necessarily sanity, but a safe level of operating, that I was comfortable to be in around other people. Because remember, some of these antidepressants, they really fucking knock you sideways. I've had stuff that, like, you know, proper Dawn of the Dead stuff, you know. Yeah, it knocks you out and go to sleep, and that's great. Everyone looks to have a little bit of a kip, and that certainly fucks you up when you're not having that with an illness. It makes it much more hard to recover when you're not well slept. But some of these things, you know, they just fucking knocked you out, and the next morning you were groggy as fuck, and like you were just wandering around like a zombie, you know. And yeah, all right, that means you're not being suicidal, you're not feeling depressed, you're not anxious, and all those things. You're not being anything else, but you're also not able to laugh, not able to fucking get horny over things, not able to get angry over things, all the things that make us human. You know what I mean? You know, getting fucking hungry for an idea, getting happy about things, laughing our faces off, you know what I mean? Wanting to shag things, you know, or people, well, you know, let's keep it within the realm of legality, I suppose. But those drives that we've got as humans, they're not always the illnesses that we should be medicated out of ourselves. And that's what certainly some of the drugs that I've taken medically, prescribed to me, if you like, were doing. However, you know, like I say, I was on drugs for quite some years, a couple of decades, and then some. When I approached that as an issue and started to come away from my addiction, I realised that there was something beneath that which was probably as damaging to my person, to my soul, if you like, and that was my complex mental health disorder, which of course I'd always put down to the chaotic nature of my drug abuse. Well, actually, the chaotic nature of my personality was just enhanced or subdued, depending on what I was fucking taking that day, by the drug abuse. So I was always at a bit of a loss. I was at odds with the idea of coming off of recreational drugs if I was just going to be on pharmaceutical drugs, because it seems like a bit of a, you know, it's a substitute, isn't it? So when people stop smoking and they take out vaping, it's like, well, you haven't stopped smoking, you're just fucking smoking something different. It's a substitute, you know. And I understand that, you know, there are things like the methadone, Subutex, things like that you take to get away from the thing, which is more devastating. Although the methadone program is not anything less fucking devastating. But that's, you know, that's an axe to grind for another time. So I can understand that substitution plays a role in weaning you off of something, but when you're just going from one to another, doesn't really, for me, it doesn't really help. You know, what I learned about addiction when I was getting clean through the rooms, through the fellowship, was that before drugs, we had this illness. We had the illness of addiction, and that could be manifested in many, many different ways. Of course, it was before we were taking any substances, you know. And I think when I looked back, I was addicted to those weird fucking smelly rubbers at school. You know what I mean? I absolutely, obsessively, compulsively had to collect those things, fucking hoard those things, and that was a very addictive tell in very sort of early life, you know. And so when you look back and see things like that, you can see that there's this character type, this personality type that was there, that was probably a tell that you're going to be an addictive personality a little bit later on down the line. And of course, you find out all about substitutes when you take away the substance and you realize the illness is still there. Like, for example, in the first few months of being clean, I got absolutely addicted to like obsessively collecting Clint Eastwood movies, of all fucking things, you know. But I'd lose my shit over it. I'd be waiting at the door for them to fucking come through from Amazon or wherever. You know, real sort of obsessive stuff. And then another one, which is much more dangerous. We will come back to this at some point as a whole theme because it really sort of attacks the world. Addicted to pornography. I fucking wanked myself raw. I really did, you know. So that's interesting. You supplement the substance for something else when you know you're looking at addiction. However, we're not talking about addiction today. We're talking about medicine. So I had the issue when I came off of recreational substances that I was supplementing them with pharmaceutical substances, and I just thought, well, it's not, you know, is one any better than the other? I don't know. Jury's still out on that. And I think if you can handle your recreational drugs, if you can handle your pharmaceutical drugs, and they're serving a purpose rather than you serving them, fucking crack on. I can't. I was gutting, but I can't, you know. If you can, fucking fair play, enjoy, you know. It's not me advocating it, but I'm also not. No, fuck it, it is me advocating it. If it's cool, if it's enjoyable, if it's fun, if it's not hurting anybody else, get on it. I can't. I'm gutted, but I hope you enjoy it. So there was this whole fucking hang up for a long time about me taking pharmaceutical drugs on a daily basis so I could control my moods, control my behavior, just generally feel like that level that other people seem to experience as a typical, you know, not continuously up and down, and you know, behaving in really fucking dangerous ways and behaving in really sort of reckless ways, and then spending a lot of days sort of, you know, sleeping in your own shit and refusing to answer the door and that sort of thing. You know, that's not a typical way of being. Other people have typically more sort of level ways of doing it. So I was always a little bit worried about doing that because I just thought it was a bit hypocritical to come off of leisure drugs and go on pharmaceutical drugs. It just means that, you know, you're changing your dealer, aren't you? You know, it means that you're not buying local anymore, you're buying global. You know, I've got my own political views on that too. But it was a hard one. It was a hard one for me to get to come to terms with. Now, the reason that I am, and the reason that I'm saying that, like, you know, I haven't necessarily got an issue with big pharma per se, you know, not outwardly, let's fucking ban all large medical research, is because I am at a place where I'm much more well than I was at other times in my life because of the medication, because it allows me then to eat well, sleep well, talk to people, have relationships which are not chaotic, have relationships which are not mutually destructive. Yeah, I can meditate. I could exercise if I wanted to. I ain't fucking gonna. I can do those things because that base level of the medication is there to top up the chemical imbalance which I've got through being unwell. So I'm not knocking medication. There's also, you know, painkillers are a difficult one for me because I was fucking knocking back opiates like I was going out of fashion. I'd lose other people. I'd lose my scripts, and I lost it on the bus twice this week. You know what I mean? Just so I could keep filling out scripts, and I'd like forever have fucking bad back, so I could you know, constantly getting bags and bags of tramadol, like, you know. And I was, you know, buying other people's scripts off of them. I was fucking robbing old people's medicine cabinets and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So opiates, painkillers, are a real fucking nasty thing. However, if you've had something like back pain or toothache, you ain't telling me that you're going to sit there with a fucking quartz crystal up your nose to get rid of the pain. You are going to bang something pill shaped to get rid of it. And that's not me knocking holistic approaches, alternative medicines. It's not me knocking that at all. But what I'm saying is, it gets in there, does what it says in the tin. It gets in there, does the job, fucking boss, you're out, you know. And that makes a real big difference when you're hurting. Is that we can trust it in that sense. It's uniform, isn't it? It does what it says on the tin in every different situation and in every location. It's uniform. Whereas other remedies that are perhaps not, because they're much more personal to you, personal to your immediate family, your culture that you're in, the environment that you're in. They're much more sort of relational in that sense, you know. Whereas pharmaceuticals aren't. They're uniform across the galaxy, if you like. Everyone's got the same thing. So I'm not knocking pharmaceuticals outright. However, we do need to be critical of them, because they've waged war on alternative medicines for a long time. You know, I've had conversations with, I don't know how many people that have rejected traditional industrialized, westernized pharmaceutical approaches to cancer treatments. So many people are looking at other things now, and I've seen, you know, to be fair, I've seen people really suffer going down the alternative route, and that's fucking heartbreaking. I've seen people suffer with chemotherapy and radiotherapy and things like that. So it's a real difficult one. I think that again, that needs to be sort of personal choices. We can't force those on people. But people are looking much more away from that traditional surgery approach, that standardized pharmaceutical approach, and looking at things like, you know, we've been here for millennia, and we've only really had little packets of pills for not even a couple of 100 years. You know what I mean? You know, going back to the con men with the snake oil, that sort of thing. You know. A lot of pharmaceuticals have got to do with the American dream, haven't they? You know, you can go from town to town with your bag of tricks, and you can make a lot of money from that. And so, of course, pharmaceutical giants just got on the back of that and gone, yeah, this industry to be had here. People are always going to be fucking sick. We can make money out of that. But people are moving away from that. I think not necessarily wholesale, but people are moving away from that in bigger numbers than they ever were. I think, you know, if you're going back sort of 20 years, you'd look at holistic approaches. Oh God, I can't think of the name of it now. Which, you know, one of the fucking symptoms of me being me is that my memory is not fantastic. I don't have a researcher here for me to throw that sort of stuff up. And it's a fucker, because I will have to try and remember it. But that ain't happening right now. Homeopathy, that's the one. Homeopathy. It did happen now. Brilliant. The meds are working. Homeopathy. So a system where you've got lots of different it's tincture, essentially. You know, you've got different elements of natural remedies, you know, natural occurring minerals and spices and herbs, whatever, you know, which is okay for cooking, not necessarily okay for medicine in our popular conception, you know. And we had this sort of cure-all idea about what homeopathy does. Very flimsy science on that. However, I ain't sure that any of us are really trusting mainstream science at the moment either. So that S word is a really difficult one to throw into things when we are dealing with ourselves as full beings with loves and desires and aches and pains, and people that we care about, whose opinions and feelings matter to us too, you know. So it's much more complex than just saying this is scientific, this is what's tried and tested, and this is what's worked. So I think sometimes it is much more about the relationship that you have in the space and time that you're in, whether you take treatment, whether you take evasive therapies, whether you go down a route where you thoroughly believe in an alternative therapy and everyone around you can see that it's not working. You know, there's much more of a relational approach to it. We're not machines. We can't just have a cog put in or replaced to fix us. You know, it's much more of an ongoing process that has everybody's feelings and reactions embedded in how we should respond to that. And I think that's much more where we're going now. I don't think this industrialized model of humans, I think we sort of kind of, that's done its course, isn't it? You know, fuck that. That's not what we ain't that. You know? We love and we laugh and we shit and we fuck. We're not machines. We're much more broken and fragile and spiky and funny and weird than just clockwork. So we need to approach it in a different way. There's no way two ways about that. And that's certainly, I think, where we are at the moment. We look at something rather than alternative medicine. It's got the term complementary medicine. Sorry, just go back to the homeopathy. What I was banging on about that is, so yeah, so memory is fucked. keeping to a subject is fucked. There's quite a few things with McKenna's mind that are not really going to tally up well in terms of a format of podcasts. Go somewhere else? I don't know. Stay here and persevere with it. I fucking got it. It's your choice. All right, I'm no fascist. Your choice. When we go back to homeopathy and things of the like, so crystals, energy healing, light work, all those sorts of really alternative things. It used to be in this domain of people that would own a dream catcher, you know? They would perhaps have a jumper with a wolf on it. And they would tell you about their reincarnated self as Big Chief shitting wisely. Because, of course, everyone was related to an American Indian. Native. First Nations person, or however we're saying that now in a way that isn't derogatory. But in the same way, I've always felt that it is really fucking derogatory, you know, because what if you were reincarnated? Well, why weren't you reincarnated from somebody that used to sell coal? You know, why weren't you reincarnated from somebody that had, I don't know, 15 kids and that was good, that was fine, that's exactly what they were. Why do you all have to be fucking Cleopatra? You know what I mean? You know, you've all got to be, Rasputin is my spirit guide, you know. Why have all these real key figures got to choose you, Karen? However, you know, I'd say it's not to knock people like that, but I'm fucking knocking people like that, let's face it. You know, if you've got a wolf jumper, you've got a fucking problem. But it's no longer in that domain, is it? We're not seeing people that are approaching energy work, light work, crystals, spirits, all of that sort of stuff. We're not just seeing that with that era of people that looked like that. If they were on the fringes of society, they looked like they was on the fringes of society, you know. And now it's not so much like that. I think people can pick and choose so much more. They can be postmodern with their beliefs, if you like. I've forever got fucking incense going, and look at me, I look like a fucking Muslim prison convert, don't I? You know, I'm let out on day release. You know what I mean? And yeah, I've got Shiva on the wall. You know what I mean? So there's not necessarily one school of thought that comes back to that. So we can look at things on their own merit. And much more people are going towards more what we would call alternative therapies, and more, I think, more significantly, what you would call complementary medicine. So we will take surgery as an option. We will take consultation from a medical professional as an option, but then we'll also consider something like CBD oil, which a lot of people are doing now. And I mean a lot as well. You know, you consider that, you know, it was only sort of 10, 15 years ago, and you would have had to really sort of appeared to be like a fucking hippie to be caught in the idea of anything like marijuana in your lifetime, you know, in your lifestyle. And now, you know, nans are on CBD oil for different bits and pieces. So that's quite cool if it's serving a purpose, if it's working for people. Like I say, you know, if it's doing it for you, do it. If it's not doing it for you, don't fucking do it. Life's too short to be, you know, barking at the wrong tree all the time. So yeah, complementary medicine, I'm quite keen on the idea of that. I'm quite keen on the idea of people having this idea of a professional relationship with healthcare workers. Because let's face it, they are well trained. They do a lot of fucking time studying and working to get to where they've got. I'm not going to take it away from any consultant or any doctor. Yeah, my kids have been in hospital a number of times. There were lots of really, really scary things like meningitis and bronchiolitis and things like that, you know, like real scary. Lumbar punches on a baby. It's not something I'd wish on anyone. It's fucking horrible, you know. Horrible for them, horrible, you know, egocentric. I'm talking from my point of view. It's fucking horrible to see. I know for their mother, it was horrible to be around. It was a real nasty time. And of course for them, not that they remember it, but it's, you know, puncture in the fucking spine is not cool. So, you know, hats off to them for doing their rigorous research and learning and testing of those skills over time to be able to do those things. We wouldn't be where we are in society without that. So it's not just a dismiss what's become traditional doctors and dismiss pharmaceuticals out of hand because, you know, I own a fucking quartz crystal. It's not, you know, it's wrong to do that. However, we can look to things like complementary medicine, can look to things that are something that were in our lives as a species for much, much longer than pharmaceuticals. So especially, you know, go back to what I said as we kicked off, that, you know, all pharmaceuticals essentially came from nature and then were synthesized and made uniform and then punted straight back to us, you know. So it's not to knock that, but it is to say we're moving into this era now that we can start to look at other things that go alongside that, you know. Not to say let's not have our leg amputated, but let's see what else we can do. Leeches, that's a really good thing, isn't it? You know, fucking weird. And that's worked its way into sort of mainstream medicine, as putting a leech on to draw out toxins, draw out poisons, that sort of thing. So people are much more, you know, medical professionals are much more open and receptive to these things than they were a little while ago, you know, which is cool. Things are seeming to move in the right direction. But of course, medicine becomes politicized, doesn't it? There's a lot of money in it, so there's a lot of power in it, so there's a lot of politics to do with it. And I think one of the things that's leveled at big pharma a lot of the times is the suppression of information. They hold back on things because they've got too much to lose not to. I know, you know, it's a comparable industry, but I've heard that the patent for a rechargeable a car battery, a battery that size that could run a car, solar rechargeable, that patent is owned by the petrochemical industry. So they buy the patent, they buy the map of how to get there and how to build that thing and how to use that thing properly, and then they stick it on a fucking shelf because it would compete too much with the money that they're making out of fossil fuels. So yeah, it's a comparable industry is what I'm saying. So there is it leveled at pharmaceutical companies that would suppress certain information if there was a risk of it affecting their profit margins. You know, these big fucking profit margins, huge unfathomable numbers, you know, for people like us. So they will keep information back for a certain time. You know, there's been quite a lot of cases where things were rushed out far sooner than they perhaps should have been without proper or adequate testing. Because the testing quite often seemed to be on its immediate efficacy, so whether it would cure or curtail something in the right now, and there was not so much of an onus on the effect that it would have further down the line. So you see things like thalidomide, which was used in pregnancies, I believe. I'm not even sure what it was for, but it was used in pregnancies, and it caused lots of deformations. People were coming out with I don't mean to sound crude, but it was almost like flippers for hands. There was a guy in the American Horror Story, the show in Freaks, Matt something or other, and I met him years ago. He was a fucking lovely guy. He was going under the stage name of the Thalidomide Ninja at the time, which is funny as fuck. But he's somebody that sort of got me thinking about how, you know, with all the best intentions in the world, a vaccine or a medicine, a fucking medicine for want of another word, is introduced into society to reduce a something of whatever it is, but then the knock-on effects from that are really quite horrible and heinous, you know. And that thalidomide was certainly one of those. I think you've got a lot of criticism for things like heavy metal poisoning, you know, mercury in certain vaccines. There was, you know, you got a whole anti-vaxxer crusade against the links with autism, and I think it was the MMR vaccine. And it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a really difficult one because people on either side will shout about science, and yeah, we can look at peer-reviewed stuff, but that's not what the man on the street is. They're not reading peer-reviewed stuff on either side. You know, pro or con. They just shout science at each other. So it's really, really difficult. I think some of these things has got to be on, trial and error. What's right for you? It's a difficult one. It really is a difficult one. I mean, I never thought I'd see myself as an anti-vaxxer. I would certainly be refusing for any of my family to take any of the flu vaccines that are coming up that are being suggested. For me, my personal experience is that the flu vaccine has not helped anybody that I've known. It hasn't cured the flu for one, but it hasn't helped anybody that I've known to have had it to be any less sick after having it. So for those reasons, I would be unhappy to use it. Also, I think it takes about 10 years for something to be tested and then to test it over long terms to see whether it's safe to go on a market. So rolling out a vaccine for a new or a relatively new virus or variation of a virus, to me seems quite irresponsible. So, like I said, never thought of myself as an anti-vax. That's probably the route that I'm going to go down. And of course, do your own research if you want, do your own reading, have those conversations with people and make up your own mind about that. And, hopefully we won't be in a situation where things like that are mandatory. Otherwise, we can't access lives and our freedoms are gone. So like I say, things get very, very political with it because there's a lot of money and there's a lot of power over that. So, suppression of information. So we wouldn't necessarily know about something that was a natural remedy because it would be at odds with the commercial version of the same medicine. So we wouldn't necessarily know about that. Wouldn't necessarily know about things that went wrong or were dangerous within clinical trials, because that may affect the impact of that particular drug on further down the line. And then there's, they get the patents done, they start using them and realize it's completely different. There's a drug, I believe it's called Zyban. They used it in American prisons as an antipsychotic, and they found that the guys that were using, because mainly guys that were using it as an antipsychotic, were no less psychotic, but none of them wanted to smoke. So it became a drug for non-smoking, to take the cravings away from that. But it didn't do what it said on the tin. It didn't. Even though it was produced like that, and the empirical evidence said that chemical composition should work for that sort of neurological problem, it didn't, but it stopped people from smoking. So it was a side effect. And there's lots of variations like that. It's just the only one that I can remember. So yeah, so we're in a place that looking at complementary medicine might be something that really sort of goes along with how we are thinking about taking a little bit more control over our own bodies. Not throwing science out, not throwing the baby out of the bathwater in terms of a history of medicine, but recognizing it is it's a history that's happened over a very, very short time, and we're a species that have been around for a long, long time, and there is probably lots more knowledge that we've got that we have. A species with amnesia is the Graham Hancock quote, which is great. We've been here for a long, long time, but we don't really know how we got here. We've forgotten a lot of what we know. And again, not to romanticize the rainforest dwellers, like I was saying, and not to primitivize people who live in tribes either. But there is the story of ayahuasca, which is the naturally occurring drug medicine that creates DMT experiences in the body. And it's between 2 or 3 different plants that are used together. And I think one of it was an acid or an alkaline. It cancels it out, but it then activates one of the other chemicals to work in there and produces DMT type experiences. And that's some real fucking interesting science. But there's no labs in the rainforest, so that was done clearly by trial and error a long, long time. There are thousands of different genus of plants and all the different subspecies of plants and roots and vines and leaves that you would have to have all tried together to come up with this, because I don't necessarily believe that it was by accident either. There are in penicillin, which was one of the things which changed how infections were treated. the birth of antibiotics, was a sandwich dropped in a petri dish or something like that, and they the mold that grew realised it was killing off certain bacteria. So yeah, things happen by accident, but the ayahuasca story is something that really does blow my mind. I just cannot see that many variables being put into place over any amount of time to come up with this very specific combination or recipe of plants. So yeah, that's got to do with relationships to environment, those culturally specific things about how we use certain plants and what we use them for, and of course, what medicine has done is taken us down a route where it's purely, in the Western world, it's purely functional. Okay, so there is a problem, we put this pill in it, and then there is no problem afterwards. Whereas I think perhaps in times that we've forgotten where we've come from, it wasn't necessarily about fixing a problem so you could get back up to go to work, but perhaps it was more to enhance a certain area of life. And we are talking drugs there more than medicine in the way that we understand them. But I think that perhaps, and again, I think this is perhaps where we're heading more towards, is this idea of this holistic, or this whole body experience, this whole mind, body, spirit experience, that perhaps more natural remedies were more in line with, so you take something to enhance a certain part of life, whether it be memory or vision, or thinking forward, being imaginative, being creative, and that actually feeds into life itself as being something which is enriched by that. So if we, like I was saying earlier on, you have a good sleep, you're much more likely to heal. Now that's something which is dealt with pharmaceutical industries, but not necessarily in a holistic way. You're not sleeping, okay, take this and it makes you sleep. Not one of the ways in which you are going to heal is that you should have a good sleep. And we are looking into more of that. There's advocacy for exercise, there's social prescribing, which I love the idea of it. Essentially, it's somebody that gets paid a lot of money to tell them to do what my charity does for no money all year round anyhow. But get involved, be meeting with people, be in community, love, hug, share time. All those things are really, really good for healing. So that's that holistic idea of, it's not just a pill that you put on top of a problem that fixes it, but getting involved in being a human again in all those ways that that we can be a human, that make us heal quicker, better, and in a way that's not so controlled by take this at 4, take another one at 8. It's more personal than that. We travel along our healing path at our own rate, and set our own expectations, which is not necessarily true for uniform medication. So that's an interesting place that I hope it's going, because I think we can all get on board with that a little bit more. It does mean we'll have to be a little bit more educated. It does mean that we're going to have to sort of divorce the idea of medication and politics, which is a difficult one. Certainly now it's a difficult one. The anti-vax movement in terms of sort of resistance to the response to the pandemic is one that is as political as it is medical. Some of the reasons that I've got for it are entirely for the well-being of the people that I care about. Some of them are to do with my philosophical belief about the state and state control of human freedoms. So that's what I mean. We need to work on what it is that we're arguing for or against when we're having those discussions, because not all of those discussions are purely on how the mind, body, spirit are working, or not, as the case may be. So that's an interesting thing. I think certainly going down sort of more holistic routes is okay, but let's not put too much emphasis on those. I was a Reiki healer a while back. I've become a very secular person, so very cynical and critical of all sort of energy stuff, even though I meditate all the time. So I'm at odds with it. I think psychologically I'm at odds with this spirit world, if you like, or the energetic world. But I did see some really positive things from the Reiki that I was performing with people. Now, whether that was necessarily the energy that was working, or it was just that amount of human contact that you've got. You know, because the efficacy of placebos is something which is a bit special, isn't it? You know, why does a drug that hasn't got any chemical reaction to do anything, why does that heal? Well, because it's something about that hope that's offered with taking a drug. It's something about that attention that's given to you. Like bedside manner, that's the thing. I always thought like bedside manner was leaving the name of a taxi company out so they could get themselves home in the morning. But it's more about how you're approached when you are ill, you know. So this idea of a family doctor that's been you know, related for generations, that everyone's on first name terms and they're relatable to one another. That in that there's something healing in that itself. You know, I think one of the things I've noticed with modern doctors is you very rarely get eye contact. I mean, if you even get to be in the same room as them, you very rarely get eye contact because the onus is on the information that's on the screen and not necessarily on the information that can be communicated in lots of non-verbal ways between one human soul and another human soul. And I think the lack of that is what we've seen as something where we've perhaps considered medicine to become callous, you know, and it loses some of that. So when I was doing Reiki, I considered it to be more along those lines, the psychological value of two humans in the same space. But I'm probably very fucking wrong. You know, there's a reason why chakra systems have been looked at for millennia, and they, you know, they work. When your chakras are aligned, when you're in the zone with your balance, your energetic balance, you do feel better. There's no two ways about that. It's not something we can scientifically, you know, in the terms of science that we consider them now, we can quantify in a way that's relatable, in the same way that, you know, 10 people taking a certain drug or reacting a certain way does, which is a shame. But I think we're heading more towards a time where we are much more accepting of that in general, and not necessarily, you know, the freaky hippie types that are on the edge of society. And that, I can say freak because I fucking am one, you know. It's not me looking down on anyone. I've been there. I will certainly be there again. So I like the idea of us finding our own route into things, but at the same time not being so dismissive of something that we refuse it and then suffer. Because I think, if anything, that medicine should be holistic treatments, complementary treatments, alternative treatments, surgery, pharmaceutical. Anything that should be a motivation to have in our lives should be to enhance our well-being. And I mean, sometimes that is about ridding us of disease, ridding us of elements of fragility and brokenness, but it should be about enhancing our well-being as well. So making us much more capable of not becoming ill, making us much more capable of having resistance to things, you know. And like I say, I think we're much more going down that line with social prescribing, getting out doing a bit of exercise, people being a bit more sort of aware of their diet, you know, and that's not necessarily anti-backing everything, but building up resistance to things over time like that. But I think more in a broader spiritual sense of becoming resilient to all of the ills of modern life, you know. Like I was saying earlier on, TV makes me fucking ill, so I don't do it. And I think that's where we're at, and that's a really fucking cool place to be. I'm going to wrap it up there, because I know that I could waffle on for absolutely ages, and you know, this is going out into the world where probably not even tens of people are ever going to listen to that. But if you do, I don't want to waste your time. If you're not, then, you know, your time hasn't been wasted. But do tune in next week, you ignorant fuckers. I'm not just doing this for my amusement. Actually, I am just doing this for my amusement, to be fair. But I will wrap it up there, because I don't want to bore anyone. If you've got any suggestions of what you would like to see me chat shit about at any point, let us know. Like I say, I very rarely say no to anything or anyone, which is sometimes okay, not always. But it's worth the punt, yeah. Just let us know. Drop it in the comments, send me an email, write it in blood, stamp it to my door. That'll really fucking scare the shit out of me, but I'll take notice. And then we'll see what we can do. If not, I'll come up with an idea on the day and we'll just ramble through it like we do every other week. And hopefully that's beneficial to you. It's certainly keeping me out of trouble. So thank you for being part of that. I'll leave you to it. If you are going to self-medicate, make sure that everyone around you that cares about you is in on that. If it's not serving you, don't fucking do it. If you're getting off on it and you can do that responsibly, then fair play to you. And I wish I could, but I can't. So enjoy it for me. And if it ain't serving you, don't fucking do it. Whether that's medicine or TV or relationships or just a routine that we find ourselves in. If it's not doing it for you, don't do it. You know, stop putting our pressure on ourselves to be something that we're clearly not meant to have been. You know, we're a species that's been around for millennia. The systems that we've got in place at the moment have been around for a very short amount of time. They're not the only way that we could live. So, you know, resist, smile, hug people. All of that's really good. You know where I am if you want to hug. Always open with one of those. It makes me feel better, and I know it makes other people feel better. If they're aware that you're giving them a hug, if you don't just fucking sneak up on someone doing that, there's laws against that. That's frowned upon. Right. God bless. Take it easy, guys. Love you. Bye-bye.